"Get out, you filthy old man. This cafe doesn't serve beggars." Laughter erupted across the room. The guard yanked the frail old man from his seat, his coat dripping wet hands trembling around a torn wallet. A young waitress stepped forward, pulled a bill from her own pocket, and laid it on the counter. "I'll pay for him," she said. The manager sneered. "A broke cleaner bringing trash into my cafe?" The old man lifted his head, voice rough but clear. "Trash. I own the chain of banks that funds this place." Silence hit like a slap. The manager froze. The guard's grip loosened. At that exact moment, 3 black cars bearing the Solmere Holdings crest stopped outside, and a group of men in tailored suits rushed in, calling out, "Chairman, are you all right?" Lyra Venner stood there, her hand still on the counter, the crumpled dollar bill damp from her fingers. She didn't look at the men in suits or the old man whose name she didn't even know yet. Her eyes stayed on the coffee machine's steam hissing softly like it was the only thing keeping her steady. The room felt heavier now, like the air had thickened with something nobody could name. Customers shifted in their seats. A woman in a fur coat coughed and looked away. Lyra's plain gray sweater clung to her shoulders, and her sneakers worn at the toes squeaked faintly as she stepped back. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The moment was loud enough. The Café Orlin was one of those places where money screamed louder than the espresso machine. Polished marble floors, gold-trimmed menu chandeliers that cost more than a car. It sat in the heart of the financial district where suits and egos walked hand in hand. Lyra had been working there for 2 years, wiping tables, pouring coffee, dodging glares from people who thought she was less than the dirt on their shoes. She was 28 with a face that could have been in magazines if she cared about that kind of thing. But she didn't. No makeup, no jewelry, just her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Her beauty was quiet, the kind you notice only if you're paying attention. Most people weren't. That morning, the rain had been relentless, pounding the city like it was trying to wash it clean. Idren Solmere shuffled in his coat, soaked his wooden cane, tapping unevenly on the floor. He was 76, thin as a rail, with gray hair sticking out from under a frayed cap. His eyes, though, carried something await, a story nobody bothered to read. He'd barely made it through the door when Varys Calden, the manager, swooped in. Varys was 43, all sharp cheekbones and sharper attitude. His tie always nodded like it was choking him into perfection. He lived for the approval of the rich clients, bowing to them like they were royalty. To him, Edrin was a stain on the cafe's reputation. "This isn't a soup kitchen." Varys snapped his voice loud enough to turn heads. "Get out before I call security." Mira Tharklin, a 24-year-old waitress with a fake smile and a knack for sniffing out status, joined in. She leaned against the counter, her manicured nails tapping. "What's he doing here?" Begging for leftover coffee. Her laugh was sharp like glass breaking. A few customers chuckled, their eyes flicking to Edrin, then away like he was something embarrassing. Lyra, wiping down a table nearby, paused. Her hands slowed the rag, twisting in her fingers. She glanced at Edrin, who was trying to pull his coat tighter. Water dripping onto the floor. Something in her tightened, too. Her dad used to come home like that, wet, tired, invisible to the world after losing his factory job. She stepped forward, her voice low but steady. "Let him sit by the fire. I'll cover his coffee." Varys spun on her, his face twisting. "You're breaking protocol, Lyra. We don't serve bums. You want to play hero? Do it somewhere else." Mirith smirked, tossing her hair. "Yeah, Lyra, don't drag us down with you." Across the room, Corin Daxter, a 35-year-old bank director in a tailored suit, looked up from his laptop. His face was all angles, cold and unyielding, like he'd been carved from ice. He was a regular, always sipping his latte while scrolling through numbers that decided people's lives. When Edrin's shaky hands knocked over a sugar packet, Corin grabbed a napkin and tossed it at him. "Clean it up, old man. You're making a mess of the place." The napkin hit Edrin's chest and fell to the floor. Lyra's jaw tightened. She walked over, picked up the napkin, and set it on the table without a word. Then she pulled $1 from her apron, walked to the register, and rang up a coffee. Her hands didn't shake, but her lips pressed into a thin line. She poured the coffee black and steaming and set it in front of Edrin. The room went quiet for a second, like everyone was waiting for her to crack. She didn't. Edrin looked up at her, his eyes clearing for a moment. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough but warm. "You still see people, not wallets." Lyra nodded just once and turned back to her work. In the corner, Elias Renfear watched it all. He was 40 lean with a face that blended into the background gray suit, wire-rimmed glasses, a notepad he scribbled in, now and then. Nobody noticed him. That was the point. He was Edrin's shadow, a Solmere Holdings advisor who moved like a ghost, watching, listening, writing. His pen moved faster now, catching every word, every gesture. Lyra didn't know it, but that $1 she spent wasn't just for coffee. It was a spark. Solmer Holdings had been running a quiet experiment, something Edrin called the human test. He'd show up unannounced, looking like nothing to see who'd treat him like something. Lyra had just passed. As the rain kept falling outside, the cafe's polished shine seemed to dim under the weight of what had happened. Lyra moved between tables, her steps quiet but deliberate, ignoring the sidelong glances from customers who'd laughed at Edrin. One woman, dripping in diamonds, whispered to her friend, "Can you believe she paid for that guy?" Probably hoping for a tip. Her friend snickered loud enough for Lyra to hear. Lyra's hand paused on a glass. She was clearing her fingers, curling slightly, but she didn't look up. Instead, she stacked the glass with the others, her movements precise, like she was holding herself together piece by piece. A busboy nearby muttered, "She's gonna regret that," and Lyra's shoulders stiffened just for a second before she kept moving. The weight of their words hung in the air, but she didn't let it touch her. Not yet. The next day, the air in the cafe felt tighter, like a storm was brewing. Varys called Lyra into his office, a tiny room with a desk too big for it. He held up a form, his voice dripping with authority. "You broke the rules, Lyra. Serving someone who can't pay. That's a violation." He slid the paper across the desk, a disciplinary notice with her name on it. "Sign it." Lyra stood there, her arms crossed, her sneakers planted firm. "I paid for him," she said, her voice even. Varys leaned back, smirking. "You're not the boss here. I am. Sign it or you're out." She signed her pen, pressing hard enough to tear the paper. Mireth was waiting outside, her arms crossed, a smug look on her face. "You're gonna lose your job over a homeless guy, Lyra. That's pathetic." Her voice was loud enough for the other staff to hear, and a few snickered. Corin, sitting at his usual table, overheard and chimed in his tone, icy. "Know your place, Lyra. You're not a saint. You're a waitress." The words hit like a slap, but Lyra didn't flinch. She looked at Mireth, then Corin, her eyes steady. "My place," she said, her voice soft but sharp. "I know exactly where I stand." The room went quiet again, like her words had sucked the air out. She walked back to her tables, her shoulders straight, her hands steady as she poured coffee. That afternoon, a new customer walked in. A woman in her 50s, hair dyed blonde, her purse monogrammed with initials that screamed money. She sat at a corner table, her eyes scanning Lyra like she was sizing up a pest. When Lyra brought her coffee, the woman pushed it back without touching it. "This isn't what I ordered," she said, her voice loud, drawing eyes. Lyra paused, checking the ticket in her apron. "Ma'am, you asked for a latte." The woman's lips curled. "Don't talk back to me. You're barely fit to clean this place, let alone serve me." She flicked her hand, dismissing Lyra like a fly. Lyra's fingers tightened on the tray, but she set it down gently, her face calm. "I'll get you a new one," she said, and walked away. Her steps measured her back straight. The woman muttered to her friend, "Some people don't know when to quit." That evening, as Lyra was leaving, she overheard them in the break room. Mireth's voice carried through the door. "She thinks she's some kind of hero helping a bum. What's she expect a medal?" Varys laughed low and mean. "She'll be out of here soon. Let her play Mother Teresa somewhere else." Lyra paused, her hand on her bag. For a second, her fingers tightened, her knuckles white. Then she let go, slung the bag over her shoulder, and walked out into the rain. The streetlights blurred in the wet air, and for a moment she stopped staring at a pickup truck parked across the street. It was old, rusted, like the one her dad used to drive. She blinked hard, shook her head, and kept walking. The next morning, Lyra was back at work, wiping down tables, ignoring the whispers. She was cleaning Edrin's table from the day before when she found it, a black metal card heavy with Solmer Private Trust engraved in sharp letters. No name, no number, just the crest of a company she'd never heard of. Her first thought was to turn it into Varys, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way the card felt like it carried a secret. She slipped it into her apron and kept working. Later during her break, she crossed the street to the bank where Corin worked. The building was all glass and steel, cold as his personality. She walked up to the counter and held out the card. "Someone left this at the cafe," she said. Corin was behind the desk, his suit pristine, his hair gelled into submission. He took one look at the card and laughed loud enough to make the tellers glance over. "You, holding a Solmer card. What did you do, steal it?" His voice was sharp-cutting, like he was enjoying himself. Lyra's face didn't change. She set the card on the counter, her fingers steady. "I found it," she said. Corin waved over a security guard, still smirking. "Let's see whose purse you lifted this from." The guard reached for her arm, but before he could grab her, a man in a gray suit stepped forward. Elias Renfear. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "That card belongs to Edrin Solmer, the founder of the company that owns this bank." Corin's face went white, like someone had pulled the plug on him. The guard stepped back, mumbling an apology. Elias took the card, his eyes flicking to Lyra for a second before he turned to Corin. She's returning property you should have protected, he said. Do your job better. Lyra didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked out her sneakers, silent on the polished floor. But the bank's lobby wasn't done with her. A teller young and eager to impress Corin called out as she passed, "Hey, don't come back with more stolen goods." The words echoed, and a few customers turned to stare. Lyra's steps slowed just for a moment, her hand brushing the edge of her apron. Then she pushed through the glass doors, the cold air hitting her face like a wake-up call. Back at the cafe, the whispers had turned into a storm. By the next day, the story had twisted. Lyra stole a card and got lucky, Mirith said to a group of waitresses, her voice loud enough to carry. She's a thief who got caught. Varys called her into his office again. This place has a reputation, he said, his eyes narrow. You're tainting it. Write a resignation letter or I'll do it for you. Lyra stood there, her hands in her pockets. I didn't steal anything, she said, her voice low. Varys leaned forward, his tie brushing the desk. Doesn't matter what you did. It's what people think. Mirith was outside, fake tears in her eyes, talking to a coworker. I looked up to her, and now this. I'm so disappointed. Lyra heard it as she walked out, her name erased from the schedule taped to the wall. The cafe's atmosphere grew heavier, like the air itself was turning against her. A man in his 60s with a gold watch that gleamed under the lights stopped Lyra as she cleared his table. You're the one who caused all that trouble with the card, huh? He said, his voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Should have known better than to touch things that don't belong to you. Lyra set down the plates, she was holding her hand steady, but her jaw tight. I was returning it, she said, her voice quiet but firm. The man scoffed, leaning back in his chair. Sure you were. Stick to cleaning tables, sweetheart. Lyra's eyes met his unblinking, and for a second the room seemed to hold its breath. Then she picked up the plates and walked away, her steps, even her silence louder than his words. Lyra kept working, but the cafe felt like a trap now. Every shift someone had something to say. A customer left a note on a napkin. Thieves don't belong here. Lyra found it while clearing their table, her fingers pausing as she read it. She folded the napkin, slipped it into her pocket, and kept moving. Later in the break room, she overheard two baristas whispering about her. She's acting all innocent, but I bet she planned it, one said. The other laughed. Yeah, probably thought she'd get famous or something. Lyra stood in the doorway, unnoticed, her hand resting on the frame. Her face didn't change, but her fingers pressed into the wood, leaving faint marks. She turned and walked back to the floor, her apron tied tight like armor. A few days later, the cafe was buzzing. Word had spread that a big name was coming, someone with money and power. The staff was on edge, polishing glasses, straightening napkins. Varys was practically vibrating, his smile so wide it looked painful. Myreth had changed into a new blouse, her makeup flawless, ready to charm whoever walked through the door. Then the limousine pulled up, black sleek with a silver crest on the side. The door opened and Edrin Solmir stepped out. No torn coat this time. His suit was tailored, his cane gleaming silver, his eyes sharp as they scanned the room. A group of men followed, their faces serious, their briefcases heavy. Varys rushed forward, bowing so low he nearly tripped. Welcome, sir. It's an honor. Myreth was right behind him, holding out a tray of pastries, like an offering. We're so thrilled to have you, she said, her voice syrupy. Corin, who'd been invited to the cafe for the occasion, stood nearby, his hands clasped, his smile tight. Edron didn't look at them. He walked straight to the counter where Lyra was standing, wiping down a coffee machine. The room went still. Edron's voice was steady, carrying across the silence. I'm here to thank the one person in this place who treated me like a human being. Every head turned to Lyra. Her hands stopped moving. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. She just looked at Edron, her eyes steady, like she'd known this moment was coming. Before anyone could react, a woman in the crowd, a hedge fund manager with a sleek bob and a designer scarf, stood up, her chair scraping loudly. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. You're telling me this? Nobody waitress is getting praise for what? Handing out free coffee. Her words were sharp, meant to rally the room. A few customers nodded, murmuring agreement. Lyra's hand froze on the coffee machine, her knuckles whitening. She didn't turn, didn't respond, but her shoulders squared slightly like she was bracing for a hit. Edron's eyes flicked to the woman, his expression unreadable. $1, he said, his voice calm but firm, bought more than coffee that day. The woman sat down. Her face flushed, her scarf suddenly looking too tight. Varys jumped in, his voice too loud. Lyra's our star employee. Always so kind, so dedicated. Myreth chimed in, holding out a bouquet of flowers she'd grabbed from a table. Lyra, I'm so sorry for any misunderstanding. You're amazing. Her eyes were wet, but the tears looked practiced. Corin cleared his throat, stepping forward. I was just following security protocols that day, sir. No offense meant. Idrin didn't respond. He reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. The screen lit up and a video started playing, grainy but clear. Varys's voice sneering, "This isn't a soup kitchen." Myrith's laugh begging for leftover coffee. Corrin's cold tone, "Clean it up, old man." The room froze. A customer pulled out their phone and within minutes the video was live, hashtags spreading like wildfire. The fallout was quick. Corrin's bank issued a statement by noon he was suspended pending investigation. Varys's phone buzzed with a call from corporate, his face paling as he listened. Myrith's smile vanished, her flowers dropping to the floor. A reporter who'd been invited for the big-name event turned to Idran. "Sir, are you investing in Orlin?" Edrin's smile was thin-cold. "Invest. In this?" He turned to Lyra, who was still standing by the counter, her hands folded. The room was watching, waiting for her to speak, to gloat, to do something. She didn't. She just picked up her rag and kept wiping her movements, slow, deliberate. But the room wasn't done with her. A young man, a tech bro with a flashy watch and a louder ego, stood up, his phone already recording. "This is all staged, isn't it?" he said, pointing at Lyra. "She probably knew who you were, old man. Playing the good girl for clout." His voice was smug, daring anyone to argue. Lyra's hand stopped wiping her rag, dropping to the counter. For the first time, her eyes met his, steady and unflinching. "I didn't know," she said, her voice soft but cutting. "But you did, didn't you? And you still laughed." The man's phone lowered, his smirk fading. The room felt smaller, like her words had taken up all the space. Varys wasn't done. His voice cracked as he pointed at Lyra. "You think her cheap little act means anything? She's still nothing." Myrith joined in, her voice shaking with rage. "She played you, sir. She's just a fake, acting all innocent." A few customers nodded, murmuring, trying to save face. "Maybe she knew who he was," one said, loud enough for others to hear. Lyra's head dipped, her eyes red, but she didn't respond. Her fingers tightened on the rag, then let go. She turned to grab her bag. Her movements calm, like she was leaving a room that didn't matter anymore. Just then, a soft chime rang from the counter, a forgotten receipt printer spitting out a slip. Lyra glanced at it, her hand hesitating before picking it up. The receipt wasn't for a customer. It was a note, handwritten, tucked into the machine. "Lyra, you're more than they'll ever understand." Her fingers trembled for the first time, just slightly, as she folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't look at Edrin, but her lips pressed together, holding back something heavy. The room didn't notice, too caught up in their own noise. But Elias Renfear, still in his corner, wrote one more line in his notebook, his pen moving slow and deliberate. Idrin stepped forward, his cane tapping once sharp on the floor. The sound cut through the noise. He handed Lyra a folder, thick with papers, a red seal on the cover. "This is for you," he said. "You're running my humanitarian fund now. Solmir Holdings needs someone who sees people, not wallets." The room gasped. Lyra opened the folder, her hand steady but slow, like she was afraid it might vanish. Inside were documents, shares, contracts, a title director of Solmir Humanitarian Trust. Idrin looked at the crowd, his voice low but clear. "That coffee she bought me $1 turned out to be the best investment I ever made." The truth landed like a hammer. Solmir Holdings wasn't just a name. It owned the bank where Corrin worked, the chain that ran Orlin, half the buildings in the district. Varys's face crumpled as his phone buzzed again, corporate firing him on the spot. Myrith's social media was already flooding with screenshots of her words, her sponsorships dropping her by the hour. Corrin's name was trending, his career unraveling in real time. Lyra didn't look at them. She closed the folder, slipped it into her bag, and walked toward the door. Her sneakers didn't squeak this time. The room watched silent as she stepped into the rain. As Lyra reached the door, a young girl, maybe 16, slipped through the crowd and pressed something into her hand, a small, folded paper crane. "You're not nothing," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the cafe. Lyra paused, her fingers closing around the crane, her eyes meeting the girl's for a moment. She nodded just once and tucked the crane into her pocket with the note. The girl ducked back into the crowd, but her small act lingered like a crack of light in the room's heavy air. Lyra pushed open the door, the bell above it chiming softly, and stepped into the rain, her silhouette fading into the gray. Edrin followed her to the door, his cane steady now. He paused, looking back at the cafe, at the faces still frozen in shock. "Kindness," he said, his voice carrying, "from someone who has nothing can buy the world from those who think they have everything." He turned to Lyra, a small smile breaking through. "You made me believe in people again." Lyra nodded just once and stepped outside. The limousine was waiting, but she didn't get in. She walked down the street, her bag slung over her shoulder, the rain soaking her sweater. The cafe was quiet now, the chandeliers dimmer somehow. Vera sat in his office staring at a termination email. Mireth scrolled through her phone, her hands shaking as notifications piled up. Corin stood outside the bank, his badge confiscated, his suit wrinkled in the rain. The world had shifted and they were left behind. Lyra kept walking her steps, steady, her face calm. She didn't need to look back. The truth was louder than anything she could have said. You've been there, haven't you? Judge dismissed, pushed aside. But you kept going. You didn't let their words define you. You weren't wrong to hold your ground. You weren't alone in that fight. And you're still here, stronger for it. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.